Hello there guys, my name is Tim Senna and I am really stupid. So yeah, basically, last night on my Twitch live, I sat down for 9.5 hours and I listened to the entirety of Mac DeMarco's new album, One Wayne G, live on stream so that you don't have to. And I wanted to put together a coherent video summarising my thoughts on this crazy, gargantuan album. And straight away, I know what you're thinking because on my Twitch, there is no proof that I sat there for 9 hours currently publicly. You liar. Is probably the main thought. Sadly, what happened is the stream crashed about the 3.5 hour mark, and then I restarted it and did another 6-ish hours. And yet, for some reason, that VOD was unrecoverable. I wanted this video to be more of a highlight reel of me actually reacting to the album. But what I instead have is the first 3.5 hours and then a cut-off point. So please forgive me for that. But here on screen are my analytics proving that I did actually sit down for 9 hours and listen to it back to front. And you can ask my viewers. Ask like The Lucas Show. Or ask Leandra, who was on the stream for the whole thing. I did really do this. And where do I really start with this, man? I don't know. I think it's such a long album that you can't really say anything about it as a whole body of work. Obviously, from the naming format, we know that these are a variety of unreleased concepts, demos, B-roll, spanning between 2018 and 2023. So we're like at a 5-year span of music, and it's always going to be saturated and half-baked when you've got an album with 199 tracks on. I think there are definitely movements within the album which follow what I assume are Mac's own kind of influences and inspirations at that point in time. Calling it cohesive in any way is impossible. Even being critical about the album as a whole, I think, is impossible, whether positively or negatively, because there is such a variation throughout it. And when I try and give this album a score out of 10 at the end, I think you're going to see in the way that I score it what I mean by that. The album can be described as elevator music. I think it starts very slowly. The 2018 tracks, it does feel like a lot of the music that I've used on my Twitch streams from playlists on Spotify that literally are titled elevator music. You know, it's very simplistic, kind of drum loops, guitar bits. There's a bit of the classic Mac DeMarco sound in there, but as you'd probably expect, it's very half-formed. You know, the first few tracks, 2018, 05, 12, I think I gave a 3 out of 10. 2018, 05, 29 picked up a bit. I gave up trying to keep track of each individual track. I went in at the start, like I've got notes on my phone, where I tried at the start to individually score each track. But I gave that up very quickly because it was just not possible to do that. And I got distracted very quickly. I think what I found myself doing during this stream, which was amazing because I was interacting with my viewers as we were doing it, after the first half hour, I just started to try and find ways to entertain myself. I started playing DJ Khaled sound effects over the top. I started freestyling random lyrics from other songs, whether it was Kendrick Lamar or Franz Ferdinand or Fontaine's DC, over the top of the album. It was an experience that kind of felt quite mundane. It was like being caught in a time loop at times, and you almost had to find your own entertainment. I don't know how much you can say whether that was an intended thing from Mac or not. And I would say as well, I've heard a lot of people bring up kind of arguments of, oh, well, Mac isn't really expecting anyone to listen to all of it. And I'm not a music critic. Like, this is one of the rare times on my channel where I will actually kind of be critical of something in literal terms, like I'm critiquing it. But I think it's not really valid to say, oh, Mac doesn't expect anyone to listen to it because he's put this out into the wild. You can listen to it. So I think it must surely have crossed Mac's mind that people are going to listen to this. And even the least played tracks have got tens of thousands of plays. So you can't really excuse that from Mac. I think video game menu music is another phrase that kind of kept coming up in my chat. At one point in the stream, I just put a YouTube video of the PS4 title screen up. And the music that was being played in this album fit the vibe very well. Here you go, guys. Look, it's PS4 music. It fits so well. Someone screenshot this and tweet it, please. It was kind of very, like, forgettable. It seemed like music that shouldn't really be the focal point of what you're doing. Like, if you're just going about your day doing chores or going for a walk or doing something interesting like playing a game, it's a perfectly fine album in terms of how it sounds to have on in the background for the most part. But if you're looking at an album in terms of something that should be considered, art, like if you're looking at like a Kendrick Lamar, Good Kid, Mad City, or To Pimp a Butterfly, or a Radiohead album that really is like the main draw, you're focusing on the sound, it's just never gonna compare favorably to proper albums that are curated and bodies of work. In a weird way, I'm a big fan of the game No Man's Sky. It feels at times like a procedurally generated album, but not a good one. Like 65's Days of Static did an amazing score for the game No Man's Sky where they played notes on their instruments, they made sort of formatted songs and then put them into an algorithm which rearranges the orders of the notes and makes technically unique sounds out of them. Mac DeMarco's album feels like that at times, and the songs tend to like blur together. There are points where it really picks up, and there are songs in there that actually, out of the mundane kind of meandering elevator music, leap out. Like 2018 1212 was the first song where I was like, oh, this is actually a banger. And the first point where Mac sings on 280913, that also was like, oh, okay, there are some actual songs on this record, fair play. But then you only have to wait a couple of months in real time or a few tracks on the album to get to 2019-02-05-2, which it's one of the worst songs. No, it is the worst song I've heard all year. It's just like bad and uncomfortable to listen to. I'm into my lo-fi. I love stuff like Antlers, and on Antlers' early catalogue they have tracks like Shush on In the Attic of the Universe, where you get a very uncomfortable kind of perturbed sound that then breaks through into flourishing, joyful tranquility and serene plucked guitars. But this song, it just felt like soulless and awkward and uncomfortable. Like the Tom York soundtrack to Suspiria, I remember trying to listen to the whole album, and other than Open Again, I found it very difficult because it's a horror movie score. It's meant to be uncomfortable, and you shouldn't really be enjoying a horror movie soundtrack in your spare time, because that music is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. And it felt like, in this instance, it was a lot worse than any of the tracks on Tom's album. It was just a kind of uncomfortable song. There are also moments on the track moments on the album where you get a song that is 13 minutes long, like 2020-02-29, which is literally 13 minutes of just one chord. And while I was doing this stream, I was doing several different things. I was playing chess. I ended up making a jigsaw for the most part of the stream online, and it just, even while I was doing an activity that I was kind of enjoying, it was maddening in the background to just have one note on loop. And I'm not someone who considers myself a musician. I'm a radio presenter. I'm a streamer. But I've recently started to make a bit of my own music, and before I think I'd have been less harsh on this aspect of it, but I know that right behind me is a keyboard, right? And that this 13-minute song, it's literally like, I've got a sustain pedal down there. All I'd need to do is play one chord, press the button that activates a drum beat loop, and then vaguely warble some chords. And it is just one chord. It is just like, you've got to call it a bad song. And then it feels like an even bigger insult. So I like Mac DeMarco in general. I'm not biased. I'm not a super fan. I'm not a hater. But I feel like I have to say, like 2020-03-29, it sounds like Purple Planet music. Like, I'm a YouTuber. I use royalty-free music for some of my beds. And it's like some of the tracks on this album, if I'd heard them on the royalty-free websites that I was using, I would go, oh, that's kind of a bit meh. I'm going to leave that. And that's a royalty-free website, so it's kind of mad that it's come from an artist with the prestige of Mac DeMarco. But on a 199-track album, it is kind of inevitable. You also have this weird phenomena on this album where at times it really, really sounds like an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants. I swear to God. Like, my chat were agreeing with me on this. Listen to 2020-12-30. It sounds like SpongeBob, and I feel like during that weird lockdown phase of 2020 where everyone was going a bit mad, Mac must have listened or watched a lot of SpongeBob SquarePants, because that inspiration feels like it's coming through, and it's just very weird, the kind of warped, out of tune guitars. It's not what I was expecting, and yeah, it just kind of takes you out of it. Like, what am I actually listening to? Is this still Mac DeMarco? I mentioned that I was making a jigsaw while listening to this album, and I think that's actually a really good analogy to bring up trying to describe it. It is like a massive jigsaw that is disassembled. And if you're looking at that jigsaw, with just the individual pieces, which are the songs. It's like a 199 piece jigsaw, which for a jigsaw is not that much. But let's say it's 1,999 pieces. That's what it feels like. You're looking at a complete mess. And some of those pieces might have a cool looking bit of art or paint on, but trying to get a coherent picture of what that is, or enjoying anything more than a very small portion of it, is borderline impossible. And I wouldn't say that, like a jigsaw, towards the end of the album it all comes together and makes sense. It meanders, and it doesn't end with a big crescendo. I didn't feel like, wow, I've been on a journey like I know you would with the Caretaker or something. It's more of a collection of B-roll. It's a compilation, and I think Mac has obviously acknowledged that. I don't think it's ever implied that it's not that, but it's also not going to lessen the fact that I'll bring that up as criticism, just because it's not under any pretense that it isn't that compilation. Another analogy that I've been using for this album is that it's kind of like flour and eggs, okay? If you have flour and eggs, you know that you've got a couple of ingredients you can make some really cool things with, like cake, pancake, maybe like a flan or something, or a souffle, but you need to add other things to the album. When I started to weirdly improvise some poetry over the top of it, or even jokingly riff off like Rap God by Eminem, suddenly it became a very fun experience. I could weirdly imagine this album being the backing track for a beat poetry night at some jazz bar in Brooklyn. And if you were just given this album as a template to say something or do something on top of it, I could imagine some pretty cool things being made. But by itself, you're not going to find many people who will like flour and eggs on their own, or can make something cool with just flour and eggs. Some people love it. Some people would just love a floury omelette. But those are going to be the real hardcore Mac DeMarco fans. So that's the title of this video. Hardcore Mac DeMarco fans like floury omelette. Weirdly, maybe it was just me losing my mind, but I think the album does pick up around the 100 song mark. The 100th song in particular, 2020 01 203, I think it's good. It felt like it brought a bit of energy there, and it feels more like a normal song. There's also a lot of humour in the album, that points that did make me laugh, like Cowboy Shit and Father of the Year, where it feels, I don't know, like quite a tender, mellow love song, and then he just out of nowhere says, like, everything I've said has been bullshit. Like, whether that was intended to be funny or not, I laughed a lot on the stream when I heard that for the first time. You also get some really awful lyrics on there, though, like She Get the Gold Star. It is like, yeah, it's very like childish rhyme scheme stuff. I'm sure Anthony Fantano would rip that one a new one if he could make the time to listen to it. There's also a really weird phase in the album where you get I don't know if it really is a recorder. It's like that medieval king like throne room sound. You can imagine like everyone dressed in medieval attire, that very distinctive medieval sounding instrument that comes through, and it's really surreal. I don't know where it's come from. I don't know where the inspiration was. It reminds me weirdly of Dr. D by Damon Albarn, the English opera soundtrack he made, which had apple carts on it, which I actually think is a good song. And I liked a lot of songs on that album. I thought they were cool. I don't think Mac DeMarco's album, when it is going in that direction, is anywhere near as good as Damon Albarn's Dr. D soundtrack. But it was so weird that was the vibe I got, because I wasn't expecting it. And I would even maybe wager that Mac had actually heard that Damon Albarn album at some point, maybe in lockdown, maybe before. For the last kind of 50 songs, I don't really remember anything standing out. I was very focused on my jigsaw by that point, but I think if there was something very standout, it would have grabbed me back. So, how do you summarize this album, One Way in G, this 9.5 hour gargantuan 199 track album? The funny thing about this is I looked on Amazon, and you can buy this album for $21.99, but you can also buy it like individually. You can buy each individual song for 99p. And I think I worked out like how much it would cost. Yeah, it's £197 basically you're looking at there. It's going to set you back a little bit. So yeah, how do you summarize this album? Is it even fair to give it a score overall, because you've got like 5 or 6 albums within this album? I feel like if just the best tracks were taken, you could probably put something together that was 10 tracks, 15 tracks, 20 tracks, and a perfectly fine 6, 7 out of 10 listen. As it stands in the state it's in, I definitely don't think you can call it a good album because it's just not something you can practically enjoy unless you really are going to make a lot of effort into cherry picking the tracks that you enjoy out of it. And the tracks that I enjoyed in this album, they were few and far between. You've got to really wade through songs that are very similar and forgettable to get there. The score I actually want to give this album is between a 2 and a 7 out of 10. Like, it fluctuates. I've got to give it a 2 to a 7 out of 10 because at its worst it is like appallingly bad to listen to. I wouldn't go as far as like a 1, but it is just bad. And then at its best there are moments that I enjoy. Make of that rating what you will. I don't think I can set one of those numbers as the actual score for the album. Mac DeMarco has made Schrodinger's album. It is simultaneously kind of okay and enjoyable and absolutely terrible. And there is so much of it that you can't really, like, as a body of work, give it an objective rating that is fair for the whole album because there is so much of it that is incomparable to the rest of it. So there you have it. That is my review of One Wayne G. If you listen to this album, please do comment what you thought of it and any highlight tracks. Although certainly, if you say the tracks you like, I will have no idea which one you're talking about because the naming scheme, even with the tracks that have names, it's like so hard to actually remember which one's which, apart from the Beaver Dam one and the Father of the Year one. And if you could subscribe to me to validate this pain, to make this whole ordeal worthwhile, sitting on a Sunday for 9 hours, Marco robbed my weekend from me. That would mean a lot to me. And any more albums, preferably ones that are shorter than 9 hours, you'd like to see me listen to and react to, I would love to do that. So, big love, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you in the next video.